I walked in and then I got a call. Cylance on the phone, right?
Welcome to War Stories, the cybersecurity podcast where we interview real penetration testers about real break-ins and epic hacks. Your host is Zac Davis, experienced physical and cybersecurity tester. In these short episodes, you'll experience the adrenaline rush and hear firsthand what it's like breaking into companies for a living. Enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome to another episode of War Stories, the podcast disguised as a coffee commercial. Drink cyber coffee. Have you tried it yet, Hoang?
I haven't tried it yet, but
Okay.
I probably will try a bit later.
We're going to send you home with a bag. You drink a lot of coffee.
I drink
right?
a lot of
And
coffee.
you're-
Yeah, I can't work without coffee. I drink
It's real good stuff. Did you ever work with Suki?
Suki?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, never mind. He used to work at Protivity, and he's the one who roasts it. It's really good stuff.
This actually, he roasts this coffee?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
he
that's
got like a really good like small batch source. He does it for us. It's pretty good.
I basically just, I take free coffee. I buy cheap coffee because, it's cheap. But
This is really good.
I'll take
we'll
free
give you
coffee.
some. Yeah, we'll send you home some swag.
Yeah.
So today, we've got a very special guest, Hoang.
Yeah.
You were an intern. One of my favorite times at Protivity. We've talked a lot about the Protivity lab, but what I don't know is how you've kind of got your start in hacking. And well, as you'll learn throughout this podcast, Hoang does a lot of reverse engineering and some very advanced, deep in the weeds stuff.
Right.
And I'm curious how you got there because you're a young dude. So why don't you start at the beginning and kind of tell us about yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Hoang. I used to work at Protivity as an intern, but I kind of started, I think, like you mentioned in your last podcast, like back then, people could sometimes fall into security.
Yeah.
Right. Nowadays, there's schools for it, but before, you kind of just fall into it. And it was mostly, I think, from me having a really close background in like development, right? I started out college and high school. I didn't know any coding. And then when I got into college, I kind of was like, what major you want to pick, right? And they gave me a sheet and all these stuff, and I was just looked through them, and I didn't know any of these. I didn't do any research. I can say with 100% confidence that I just picked IT because it sounds like computer, and it sounds like if I go down that list a bit further and I saw computer science, I may have picked that. But I think I just saw IT and I just circled and picked it right away before I even looked through. And if you didn't know, Drexel is you can't go in as like an undetermined. Like you have to pick your major. Right?
From the beginning. I didn't know that. I went to school in the Midwest, but we do.
Yeah, so you have to pick your major coming right in. You don't have any of that like test trial period trying to see what you like. You kind of just have to pick it. So I just pick IT. I was like, whatever. So I went there. I did.
So you didn't write any code before you got to college?
No, I
You
didn't.
learned it in college?
So no, I didn't learn any coding in college either. I learned like some PHP, some JavaScript, and things like that.
Well, if you had an IT degree, yeah, so there's probably a little bit, but you weren't like writing C code or anything.
It wasn't. Yeah, it was all self-taught because it was mostly just like web and things like that, server code, but no C, no lower level languages.
Okay.
Yeah, and so when I started, I kind of just didn't know what I was doing. I did my first intern, I just coded a bunch of like web app, and I was terrible at it. I was really dumb back then. Like looking back, I was like, what was I doing? Like, how did they hire me? But for my second internship, I actually met Anthony Elias, right?
Yeah, that's what you were telling me before the podcast.
Yeah, I met him in like a discrete math class, and he was just going on about like Protivity being like this really cool company. He did all this cool software engineer, all these physicals and hacking. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a movie. It sounds like something you would see out of like a movie. So I was really interested. So I applied, got rejected. And
Did you really?
Yeah, I got rejected. I applied, like my second co-op, I applied, and they just like, no, you didn't even get an interview. And I talked to the recruiter later, and I think the excuse they gave me, I'm not sure this is the true reason why, but the excuse they gave me was, it's like they want to hire your last co-op so that when you graduate, they can like hire you.
That might have been the case.
Right. Maybe it could have been. I don't know. All I know is I didn't get an interview.
Okay.
So I went to the second best option was UPenn. I actually went to work for UPenn, right, in their security.
I never even knew that either. So you worked there too.
Yeah, I worked for UPenn in security. But when I say security, I didn't know anything at the time, right? I was just kind of just like, I learned some stuff by myself, but like nothing where I was like hacking things. Like back then it was what, pass the hash and like, MSOA 67 and things like that, right?
Well, and I think I got to tell the audience too, like I joke a lot that like I'm not a hacker. I'm like just a really good script kiddie because I don't write any code. I don't develop any tools. I don't do any research. Like I don't actually hack anything. I just use the tools written by the real hackers. You're a real hacker. Like you've written tools, you've done bypasses for antivirus and EDR. Like you're actually hacking stuff, and you can decide how much you want to talk about the things you hack, but you legitimately hack shit. So,
yeah, it's kind of weird though, because recently I'm starting to looking for a I've been running my own companies for a while, right? And now I'm trying to see if I could take some time off and start working in the field again. And I'm starting to like get this imposter syndrome where I'm like, maybe I'm not the real hackers. Maybe I just write things and reverse things and understand how things work, but I don't know. Like if you put me against, right? Like I'm not sure if there's like a disconnect between what I know and like a red teamer who like understands the network knows. So I'm
a couple
like,
weeks,
so I
figure it out.
I think that's what people have been telling me. Like just
you could get back into it any time.
Right. So, but yeah, back to UPenn, right? Like I worked for this guy. His name is Clay Wells. I just remember his name. And he was a great boss. And we just do like code review, like PHP code review. That's all I did there. And halfway through the internship, I don't know how it started, but he was like, okay, let's talk about buffer overflow. And I was like, I don't know what that is. And he kind of just sat me down, like showed me how like the stack work and how buffer flow would usually work. And I don't even think this would work back then because like DEP was becoming a thing, like DEP, right? So
that's like a memory protection mechanism. I'm trying to think back to OSCP, but that's memory protection mechanism.
Yeah, in the stack. You can't execute on the stacks, right? So I don't even think it worked back then, but something about that just kind of like clicked in my mind. Like it's such a weird pivotal moment in your life where it's like open up the way I look at softwares. Instead of like, it's not even you trying to do something that the developer didn't intend for you to do or find like a hidden button that lets you access like some, other features. You can make software do anything you want it to do, right? If you pass in the right input. So at that point, something in my mind just clicked and like, how I mentioned, like I wouldn't consider myself as like a smart kid before that point. I feel like before that point, I just feel like just going through life. And for some reason, that exact moment in time, it just changed the way I think about softwares. And then I spent the rest of the co-op just watching Black Hat and DEF CON talks and trying to, do all this exercise about, regarding like exploitations, right? Stacks, overflow and things like that. And that's more or less how I got my third internship at, Protiviti.
That's when I came across your path. Yeah. It's interesting you say that though, because my dad has a background in development, and he wrote a lot of code and was an engineer. And I have another uncle, shout out to Uncle Bill if you're watching, but he did a lot more electrical engineering work. He always said that the lower level stuff where you're actually like, passing inputs between different registers and like, writing assembly code basically, that made more sense to him. And when you got up into the higher languages, he wasn't. And my dad's the exact opposite. He's like, which is how I am. I mean, I don't write any code. I'm terrible, but the lower you get, the more confusing you get. And I sort of wonder if you have more a mind akin to my uncle, where you like living in that super, super low level part of the development stack.
I think so. I said I come from a development background, but obviously I do a lot of reverse engineering, right? And to me personally, I think the lower level. So we have a saying like the assembly is the truth.
Yeah.
Right. So you can look at the code, and that's the thing I think a lot of developers missed out, and it's going to get a bit technical, but I think sometimes people write codes and it works, but they don't really know what the code is doing, right? Sure. And sometimes it does things that, yes, it does the same result, but it might not does it the way that you think it works, right? And that's why I think the assembly level, and when you look at that level, you kind of see the truth. What is your CPU is actually doing?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that I align more with that because, it is the truth. It is exactly how things are being executed, how things are working. And when you see data being moved around registers, that is exactly how it moves, right? Instead of, when you assign a variable in your program, right? You're not sure that.
It's a little more black and white, I guess. Like this is going there, that's going there. It's not like as,
Yeah. Sometimes like.
It's not as. It's layers of abstraction, like the higher you go, right? It gets more and more abstract from the actual ones and zeros.
Yeah, like sometimes you do something and you get a weird result and you're like, the code looks fine, right? That makes sense how it should work, but it doesn't work. And unless you look at that simply, in most cases, then you realize like, okay, maybe that code have some weird edge cases where it produce this like undeterministic results, right? And without looking at simply, it's hard to know, right? And that's why a lot of bugs exist, right? A lot of weird things happen when you're not looking at the lower level.
Sure, cool. So we get to productivity, and this is where I remember you coming in as like the ballsiest kid who ever walked in the door. You were just
I was just waiting. I was a wild card.
Yeah, you were confident.
I was late to my interview, right? My first interview I was late, and then we had to cut it a bit short. And then I just went and I met Michael Swiven, right? And I sat down with him. I was like, Michael, I'm sorry, but I'm just like, I just want to know I'm a very technical person, right? So Michael just, like there's...
Well, he was the perfect person too, because I remember that, because he was like, oh, like I'm gonna, this kid's smart. He's a wild card, but I'm gonna I'm gonna get my hands around him. I'm gonna teach him how to like do stuff right. I don't think there's a lot of managers who would have done that either. They would have just been like, this kid's crazy.
Yeah.
And
he had a sheet where you have to fill it out, like, I don't know what the sheet is like, but like he have to like rate me on like certain aspect. He just like threw the sheet out and he's like, all right, let's talk and go, like let's talk past the hash or like, all these exploitations.
You impressed him, and then you got the internship. And I just remember all the other interns, and like honestly, even like the junior consultants who had full-time jobs, like we were usually showing up like between 8 and 9.
Oh no, don't mention that.
Yeah, we would show up like 8 or 9. Like some of the older seniors would come in a little later. You'd be walking in at like 10, 10:30. Like it got later,
dude.
the sooner. You went. And you got away with it because you were good, and you would work hard. You got your shit done.
Yeah. The math checked out in my head. Like if I go in at 10 or 11, I just work a bit later. Yeah. But I think if you subtract the time, I might have, skipped out an hour or two there and here. But
it was just a bold move for an intern.
Right. And that's the thing, though. I was stupid back then. But looking back, I was like, how did they hire me? I still got an offer coming out that...
Well, you were a really nice guy. Everybody liked you. And you did work hard and you got your stuff done. And you were really good. You're a smart person, huh?
It was really fun. And I mean, you taught me a lot, right? You're the reason I'm super cocky. Right.
I am?
Yeah.
Well, I've been pen testing for a few years. And I remember I found some weird thing on an external.
Right.
And I was just like, I was trying to figure out how to exploit it. And you're like, oh, no, don't do that. And you just like wrote a couple lines of PHP and gave it to me. And I forget, I think it was like an upload thing.
Yeah, it was
like we had a shell like immediately.
Right.
And I was like, holy shit. Like he just came up with that out of the blue, like wrote a PHP shell and like got it to work with this. I think it was like a WordPress thing or something. And I was like, holy shit, like this kid's a real hacker.
Yeah, it was, you say something like, Hoang, you're a really cocky kid, but like, you are allowed to be, or something like that. You say some really life-changing sentence to me, right? and at that point, I was like, you know what? Like, yeah, I mean, I understand. I was quite cocky back then, but now I kind of have like this drive to make sure I'm good enough to be able to back up my words, right?
No, you calmed down. When you came back with a full-time job, you kind of calmed down.
Were you still there when I came back?
No, I just heard about this from Mike and Frelick.
Yeah, I had a whole
you turned into a real consultant.
Right.
Grew up a little bit.
Tie and black pants, white shirts every day, Friday even,
Yeah.
It was a blast. But I realized I was a bit of a wild card, and I'm glad Productivity still offered me a position after that, and I came back. But it was great. Yeah.
Let's maybe talk about the favorite tool, which I guess we've kind of
yeah, I think it's very it would play a lot into what I do for work, right? I do a lot of reverse engineering, a lot of trying to understand how application works at the lower level. And when I saw your podcast, and I know you told me the 3 questions going to come up, one of them is going to be, what's your favorite tool? I mean, there's only one answer I feel like is the right answer for me, and it's have to be IDA.
Okay.
Right.
So explain to everybody what IDA is, because I think most will know, but I'm sure there's a bunch who won't know about IDA. Do you have IDA Pro?
So this is what I'm going to say. I have used IDA Pro for like probably 3,000-4,000 hours of my life. IDA Pro is one of those things that you can't, I can live without, right? It lets you open up any application or binary, right? And it literally show you the assembly for it. And, I mean, a lot of things does that, but IDA have a features where you do call it decompiler, where you could select a bunch of code and you press F5 and it would spit back the pseudo C code that was used to write that assembly code.
How good is it? Is it pretty close?
It's very good. It have gone better. It stopped getting better because you can only do so much optimization on it, but it have gone very good because nowadays I work very closely with obfuscated binaries and virtualized binaries. And sometimes you have a function that's just full of junk code, like junk assembly code that does nothing, or it does something and then it undo it. So it kind of like throw you off when you're trying to read it, right? And you press F5 and IDA just like, I understand these assemblies are, they have no impact on the actual program in the full execution of the function. So they just remove it and it just sometimes it give me back something that is completely readable. And I'm just like, wow, like that's not supposed to happen. That is some really good optimization. And yeah, I honestly can't live without it. And my girlfriend gets jealous of IDA sometimes.
I get jealous of
IDA. Yeah.
You spend so much time with it.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time with IDA. Like probably 10 hours a day minimum.
Okay.
And it's something that I think it's also very broken. It's very, I feel like I'm cheating when I use it on like exams like OSCE, OSCP, OSCE, right? Like a lot of these, they make you find exploits in softwares, right? A lot of, buffer flow or some sort of weird like, I don't know, a lot of vulnerabilities in there. And sometimes they use real application, or sometimes they give you like real live target.
Like a real version of an older vulnerable piece of software.
And sometimes they make an application that is vulnerable by designs, right? They have like code in there that shouldn't be there. And then I would do this exam and I would like put an IDA, I press F5 and then I just see like a weird code in there that does nothing. And I'm just like, it has to be the vulnerabilities, right? If I'm just looking at it and how you would write it, there's no reason that code exists there. And I feel like I'm cheating in a lot of these exams by just fucking pressing F5 on IDA.
Yeah.
And I was able to it helps me like pass every exam. So
you've got, and for those watching, we have quite a few OSCPs. I've known a few OSCEs, which is, so you get OSCP, that's like pen testing with Kali.
Right.
OSCE is like kind of the intro to Windows exploitation.
Right.
And then there's OSEE, which you had to actually go and take a in-person course, right?
Yeah. So at my last job, they actually bought it for me, and then COVID hit, and they just canceled Black Hat constantly, right?
Did they do it online or something?
No, it's one of those courses where they were not willing to do it online. There's it has to be in person. Like it's a very dense course. They want you to like get the opportunity to ask questions and like work with the instructor. So they had to wait until Black Hat came back like 2 years ago or something like that.
And you went and did it?
And I went and did it. And when I did it, they actually, they spent that COVID time just redoing the entire course, right? They just modernized it, completely changed the exam and everything like that. But it was a very good experience, right? And, it's kind of bringing back to Protivity when I was there. Sandy was there. Sandy had OSEE.
Sandeep's the only other person I know who has OSEE.
Right. And everyone...
Jude, I think... He might have it. I know he did the class. I don't know if he ever took the exam. He might have.
Right. And like the lab looked up to Sandy because he was super technical. He, every time we run into some really weird vulnerabilities, like we kind of run it by him, right? And he was the only one with OSEE. And I was like, I kind of want the same thing, right? I kind of want the same, certification as him. So, it always made it my goal, but it was very expensive, right? And it had a lot of...
Were you even still working?
No,
that company when you went to take it?
No, I wasn't.
So they paid for it.
They paid for it. It got canceled.
And you just went and did it later?
I just went, yeah. I mean, awesome. There was Michael Swagan actually did a lot of, talking for me to let me keep it. Like they have the option to refund.
Sure.
Right? But I think Michael did a lot of work to make sure that I get to keep it. So thank you, Michael. I appreciate it.
Mike's the man. He takes care of his people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my favorite tool. Got to be IDA. Can't replace her.
So I know a little bit about your story. I sort of remember when it happened, but I know IDA was probably involved in that too. Yeah. So why don't you get into the war story, which is I think really different than anybody else we've had so far.
Right. I think everyone on here have had experience with like some network enumeration tools or some like exploitation tools, but I think my heart was always about binaries and evasion, something like that.
Yeah, you're more attacking the operating system,
right?
The kernel itself versus network-based pen testing that a lot of us kind of specialize in.
And this was the first internal I was in coming back out of my internship, right?
So you're back from...
Yeah.
You've graduated college.
I graduated college.
Your first internal pen test after.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was with Michael Swiven too. Actually, he and me like went there and we put the box in and set up the lab there. But then he was, he passed on the project to me.
Sure.
He's like, you got this. You got to do the whole internal. We got like 32 hours, something like that, chargeable hours. Chargeable hours back then was rough. Like I was had to beg around for chargeable hours.
Yeah.
It was rough, but
it's that consulting life.
Yeah. So like I didn't even have that much time on it, but it wasn't like a hard target, right? It was very typical. You did a lot of, listening for hashes through the network. You pass it on. You look for DA, log into some machine that they forgot to locked off, and then you dump off our LSASS, right?
Yep.
It was a very standard route, and I did exactly that. And it was one of those like 3 a.m. thing. You can't just like, it was one of those engagements.
Can't walk away.
Yeah. And I found where the DA logged in, and I had a cred who was an admin on that box. So I'm like, that should be it. You go there, you dump the DA cred, and you're done. So I went there, and I tried to dump the DA cred using Mimikatz, right? And it didn't work. And I was like, what? What happened, right? And so I found out that it was because of an EDR they have. It's called Cylance, right? And Cylance didn't just kind of like fail, but it told me why it failed. There's like a popped up to say
like a verbose error message.
Yeah, they popped up saying this application trying to read into LSASS, it got denied, right? So I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, it makes sense, right? Like to protect your LSASS. And I mean, back then this did exist, but you don't see it quite often, right? But nowadays, obviously, you can't really dump LSASS like that anymore.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a different game we're playing now.
Right. But yeah, so I got that notification, and I was just like, what? I mean, like, I heard about Cylance, but I know nothing about them. And so from different experience, I had a few ideas of what have caused it, right? What they did to block it. And in my head, I was like, this is going to be a very convoluted way to work around it. So I built up this whole contraption to like trying to like steal a LSASS handle from a different process and things like that. It's super complicated. And I ran it, and it's like, it didn't work. And I was like, what? That makes no sense. Like, that should work. Like, how are they doing this? So I add more code, and I check my code, and I print out some errors, right? And if, for the viewer who's not aware, like to read into a process, you first need to open a handle to it, and then you can read using that handle. And having that handle basically give you the permission to that process, right? So having that issues, I wrote more errors code, and I try to run it, and it just tell me that the read failed. So for me, I was like, that made no sense. I thought I should have failed opening the handle to begin with, right? That should have been the reason why I failed, and I built all these.
They're blocking that, not the actual action once it's open.
Right.
But it's saying the read failed.
Right. But it's telling me that the read was the fail, not the opening of the process that's failing. So I checked, and I was like, yeah, I did got a handle from it, but it failed to read. How's that possible? Because there's a lot of ways to stop you from opening handles to processes, but not a lot of ways to stop you from reading into something once you have the handle. Making sure that you keep in standards with Windows kernels, and making sure you not breaking like protections and things like that. So there had to be some way they're doing that. So I wasn't sure, but I know there couldn't be that many ways to do that. So then obviously I open up IDAS, I dump the process, I look at it, and then I look at it, and it's just like reprocess memory wasn't looking the same way it should have been. So, and this was something that was quite novel back then, right? But nowadays, I think everyone is aware of like how EDR works and how they blocks access to certain programs.
I don't know that very.
Yeah,
sort
but
of
people who are doing any sort of evasion kind of more or less understand how EDR block these days. But back then it was quite new, and they hook into my program obviously, and they replace reprocess memory, so that when you're trying to read into LSASS, they have a code running in your own program that kind of deny your ability to read into something else.
They're removing that function that allows the read to happen.
Well, they pass it into another function that kind of check and make sure, are you allowed to do this action? And then once, either they pass, success or fail, they pass back and they tell you fail, or they go ahead and do the actual real function that you wanted to call originally. It's called hooking, right? And when I saw that, when I saw that they have to run code on my own program to block me from doing something, it kind of just like, how you have like...
Made you mad?
No, it's not make you mad. It's like, how you have like a JavaScript, like when you work on a website, you're trying to pen test a website, and there's client-side code that run, like JavaScript code that run. You have full control over the client side, right?
Sure.
Like you have, you pop like a console, like a JavaScript console debugger, and you can type whatever in there and we'll just execute. So kind of like the same way, they executing code inside my own process. I have
you own.
Yeah, so I have full control over that. So I don't have to do anything to tell me to do.
Yeah.
Right. So I kind of just roll up something real quick to kind of just patch that, right?
block it, basically.
Remove their code, put it back like how it was before, and then just call my function and it works. Now, the funny thing is...
Did it alert or anything?
No, it didn't alert anything.
Because they weren't expecting that either. Yeah.
So the funny thing is the engagement ran, I didn't have time to do this research, right? So I found out a way, I found out a machine that didn't have Cylance on it. I dumped the credit, I got DA, right? And then we move on. And then the day after I wrote the report for this client, I did this research. I went and I bought my own copy of Cylance, and then I did this whole thing, right? I figured out how it works, and I figured out how to bypass it. And then the next day, I had to run to DC for like a conference or something, some security conference, right? And we were all going together. So I just, took my research real quick, right? I was blocking like 30 minutes. And then I clicked submit on that block, and I just left and then went to DC.
I remember the blog.
Yeah. I just wrote the blog, went to DC, forget about it. It's like no one's gonna care, it's cool, but like no one's gonna care. I went to DC, I went to the conference, I walked at the hotel, I met with all of you guys, right? I'm not sure you were there, but I know Frey was there, Michael was there, everybody was in this room. I walked in and then I got a call. Cylance on the phone, right? And
I remember this whole thing.
Yeah, so at this point, I didn't put my phone number on my blog, I didn't the only thing my blog had was my name.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like I'm not gonna hey, contact me here, right?
They tracked you down.
So obviously they took my name on the blog and they matched it up against something, and they have my phone number. And they called me. They was like, "Is that you? Did you write this blog?" I was like, "Yeah, that's me. What's up?" Right? And they was like, "So Cylance not happy. We don't like it when researcher publish these research, right, and make the program look bad." And they were the one that doing the resale for Cylance, right? So for a lot of these products, you can't just go and buy a single copy of, right? You have to have.
They're trying to sell enterprise licenses,
right.
So these resellers will buy a block of licenses and then resell them to the individual,
right. So they did exactly that, and they were worried that Cylance was gonna just take everything. Just kind of, take all their licenses away or stop selling them licenses. So they kind of just tell me I gotta remove this. And I'm in the bathroom now because it was so loud outside. Everyone was drinking or whatever.
In a hotel room or something.
Yeah, in the hotel. So I'm just in the bathroom by myself freaking out. I'm like, bro, they got my name, my phone number. It's been 3 hours since I clicked publish. How big did this get? Right? I wasn't sure who found this within the 3 hours. I literally just got to the hotel room. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll do that real quick. So I went, I changed Cylance to a different spelling, like Silence or something like that.
Call it Silence or Silent Night or something.
Yeah, something like that. I changed the name because, first of all, I didn't think they have the ability to make me change it, right? So I just kind of work in between because I wrote the blog. I'm not gonna remove the blog, right? I think it's cool research. I'm not gonna remove it, but I give them some respect. So I changed, the name a little bit. And then people were super confused. It's what is this Cylance? It spells silence, right? And I was like, I know it spells silent. I know that, but I changed it for a reason.
Got mad.
Right?
It's kind of funny. You think they would have just patched it and moved on.
Right.
But you sort of wonder, you see people releasing research, you wonder how many of those backroom phone calls get made where some company's mad.
It's crazy how fast it happened, right? It's a few hours in. And it's funny because I know at the time, and I'm not sure this is true or not, right? But there was another company, MDSec, that was writing a identical blog to this, right? If you look back in the timeline, they released their blog a few months after I released mine, right? And I was told by someone that they wrote this whole blog preparing for release on Cylance and the same techniques and everything.
And then they saw somebody else beat them to it.
And then they saw me beating them to it, and they were not happy about it, right? And I understand the feelings, right? But sometimes, the timing just work out. If I posted this, I don't know, a month late or something like that, it might have been, just another guy facing the same thing. But I'm glad I beat them to the race,
Yeah.
And and I think I wouldn't say I invented techniques. That techniques is definitely probably there before I was born, but it was a novel use of a techniques that was not usually used in cybersecurity, right? It was used in a different field, and I took that and applied to this field, and it was great because I think it started off a whole different arm race with EDRs nowadays, with people doing manual syscall and things like that, which I did mention in my blog post, just saying I was gonna write it, but then I got lazy.
Yeah.
And I think I sparked a whole arm race with how to evade EDR and how to bypass these controls. right? And EDR have gotten a lot better since then, right? So most of them probably don't work, but you still see like there's a lot of tools that allow you to do like manual syscall nowadays, or unhooking your APIs, or loading a different version of the DLL so that you can like use an unmodified copy. So I think I provide some good value to the world, right? And Cylance got to yell at me for a little bit, and everybody's happy.
Yeah, there we go. Wow.
Yeah, and I think my license of Cylance after that got revoked.
It was gone.
It was gone.
Did you get your money back?
I didn't get my money back, but like I'm not even sure you could buy Cylance license anymore like that, because like I feel like that did not make Cylance people happy.
Yeah.
And
well, there you've got a lot of money riding on it, you know, and you're poking holes.
And I try to
it's the
replicate.
cat and mouse game of security, though. Like,
You're
it
right.
should be ready. People are going to be trying to do that.
Yeah.
You're lucky you posted it and didn't just sell it on the dark web, right?
Right,
Could have been way worse.
I try to replicate that with a lot of other EDRs, like CrowdStrikes and things like that. And I heard other people have took the same research and had success with them, with other EDR products. But for me, and also the lab back then, we didn't have a license, a CrowdStrike license, and I couldn't find anywhere, where people were selling, single license to CrowdStrike. So, that research ended there. But I wish I could have gone further with it.
Yeah, well, we've got CrowdStrike because we actually use it on all our computers.
Right. Yeah.
So.
I wish I could get to play with it, but I never got a chance.
Yeah. Well, maybe someday, right?
Right.
Might have to jump back into the security industry one of these days.
That's probably one of the first thing I do.
We'll get you a copy to play around with.
For sure.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot for being here, Hoang. You got anything else to say? Anything you want to plug before we sign off?
Yeah. So I am looking for opportunities to come back in the field, like you say, right?
Okay.
I am looking for a job that, if you need someone who have a strong development skill with reverse engineering, bypassing evasions, I'm your man.
We'll throw your email in the section.
Yeah.
And if you want a super elite hacker who knows how to bypass EDR, I think you could do it again.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we need to find you a research job. I think you'd be really good
Right?
at that.
Yeah. It's just hard to find these days because, everybody wants red teamers and stuff. And I could do it, but I like the research aspect
Call up
of it.
Leo. He might have something for you.
Maybe.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. I used to be his personal consultant for a lot of things,
I think you two are one of the few who actually like hack on a level where you can exchange ideas, where I would be no use to you with any of this. I don't know any of that shit works. But
Leo was really fun to work with. He was a really smart guy.
Yeah.
And
Leo's
he knows how to apply it too.
Yeah.
So thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, man. We'll get you some cyber coffee. For those of you out there, SEVNX.com, and we'll see you for the next one.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. That was sick, dude. Nice job.